My name is Eliza Laura Farrell. All the people in Truckee called me Graham. However, my husband called me Lida, which I much prefer. I grew up in Weston, Oregon in 1877. At that time, there was not much transportation. I just really think of the idea of having to ride in buckboards and covered wagon types of things to get around. My mother was my father's second wife. I had two brothers. In childbirth, my mother died. Because my father had his work involved not staying in the area, he had all these children scattered around, and so the neighbors took them. Mr. and Mrs. Allen took me. They eventually adopted me. I didn't go to high school, as was quite common. I actually went through 8th grade, literally to go to school. My father gave me a horse, which I could ride. He later fixed up a little buggy, so I had a horse and buggy to ride. I met Edward Patrick Farrell. He was a mining engineer. My father and him met, and they were working on some kind of a mining thing. And so we got married in 1895. My life was filled with moving around. So I have been in multiple states. When we were at the mining camps, it got harder and harder, and we were not always having an easy time financially. He was gone many of the times. I was taking care of these kids. But that didn't mean I wasn't self-sufficient. Eventually, he died of Spanish flu. I had 7 kids and one on the way, which came 3 months after he died. I lived at that time in Auburn, California. The senator's house had me wash and iron clothes, and that's what I did, and I did that for the judge. The other thing that they had me do was I actually cooked and served during these big banquets at the U.S. senators. I got paid, not necessarily a lot, but enough. We didn't own our house, it was rented. But a few years later, just before the war, my oldest son bought me and my children a house in Hangtown. It's now called Placerville, California. I never drove. I never had a car. People had to drive me around. I worked at the polls for years and years because I thought it was important. I didn't get to vote until 1920. Some women say, I'm not going to vote because it doesn't matter. Darn it, it matters. It matters no matter what the issue is. I think the younger women take this totally for granted. They forget that there were women that were beat up trying to make sure that people heard that they should get to vote. People didn't take them seriously because women weren't smart enough, and I'm putting quotes around that. Women can't make decisions. All of these excuses, and yet women still pushed for this. I had a few women role models. First of all, I can't not eliminate Laura Allen Steele, my adopted mother. She raised me, she set me in a direction to understand that I have the ability to do what I need to do. Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, I realize that was later, but she was such an important role model in how to think about the family and women's issues. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, I think, was an important role model for me. I liked the idea she was an abolitionist. Everyone is equal, and I think that was an important thing to be aware of. When I grew up, women didn't have a choice, and they cared about themselves and others, but they did not have a choice. All these decisions, if they're made by men, they don't think about women's issues. I hope now when the election is coming up, people say, yes, take a stand. Women go out and vote and step up to run.
I was born in 1947 in Adrian, Michigan. came out here to Washington State at about 6 months. My father died when I was a baby, so I never knew my father, and I am an only child and was raised by a single mom. Now that I'm older and raised 2 daughters and had a lifelong marriage, I look back on all my mom went through with much, much gratitude and high regard. She's the hardest working person I've ever known. And despite not finishing high school, she's one of the brightest people I've ever met. My mother was the single biggest influence in my life. You ask me for someone outside that personal model to me, I probably regard Eleanor Roosevelt about the highest that I can. I think there was a strong woman dedicated to our country, doing every time what she thought was best and right by the people of this great country. And through some very challenging times, personally and professionally, nonetheless, she stood tall, proud, and got a lot done. And I think we all owe her a debt of gratitude. I spent many of my days after school sitting in a chair with a little desk in the back of the Rainbow Cafe in Auburn, Washington, as my mother was a short order cook. Summer times, I rode my bike to the Metzler's blueberry farm, where I became the shed boss of the blueberry farm. So that was pretty much my growing up. When I graduated from high school, I was voted most likely to succeed. So when I became Attorney General and then later Governor, I heard from many of my high school classmates saying, "We told you so." Probably the biggest influence in my life at that point was John F. Kennedy.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have forever lived by his message of, serving the public is a noble thing to do, and that anybody in this great nation must give back to their community at large, and they can do it in a number of ways. But one of the ways is you could actually be a public servant. I had listened to John F. Kennedy's call, and I thought, I'm going to go out there and save the world. So off I went to Gonzaga Law School, never looked back, frankly believed, despite my youth, that I was right in what I thought law could do, and for me did do. I became a lawyer and was able to use it to better the community. At the time, I was working in the Attorney General's office, and I was doing child abuse and neglect cases. And I had in the recesses of my mind that maybe in a given circumstance, any one of us could strike a child and not mean it. That's how I dealt with how difficult the job was, to be honest with you. And the minute our daughter Courtney was born, I could no longer accept that idea at all. I indicated to the office, maybe I wasn't suited to continue to do that job. I'd like to give myself a shot at trying something else. Well, lo and behold, the new Attorney General came in and offered me to be the head of what was the Spokane office. So we did consumer protection, labor and industries, education, and social and health services, and particularly child abuse and neglect. And my career kind of took off from there. I adored my role for almost 4 years at the Department of Ecology as the head of it. 2 things that were really quite significant when I served, one of which was the Hanford cleanup. And we were in the process of preparing to sue the federal government. One, because they were totally uncooperative with us about what was the contamination over there, what was it comprised of. So one day I called up and basically said, listen, I'm ready to go to the table and talk about this, and we can do it the right way and get things going and get the place cleaned up, or we can spend years in litigation and fight and get nothing accomplished. And they agreed to go to the table. So months later, we signed the Hanford Cleanup Agreement, which was the first in the nation. And they've never signed another one as strict and comprehensive as that one. Immense progress has been made. I am not going to say that it isn't a heck of a lot better than what it was, but it needs to be better. I'd love to be the Attorney General of this state, but running for office statewide, I'm not ready for that kind of thing. Well, long story short, I did run, and quite frankly, at the end of the day, I think I have my oldest daughter to thank for that. My husband and I had a long conversation about whether I should run for office and what would it mean to the family. I remember very distinctly saying to our two daughters, we've given it a lot of thought, but we really want to do the best for you. So for you, I am not going to run for Attorney General. The oldest daughter then got up, stomped off upstairs to her room, slammed the door. I turned to my husband and I said, what more could she ask? I have just given this opportunity up. So I go upstairs, knock on the door, ask if I can come in. And I said, can you explain to me what is the problem? To which she said, you've always told my sister and me that there is nothing we can't do. And now you've said, unless you're a mother of two girls, in which case you can't run for public office. What kind of message have you given us? To which I said, you've made a good point. Let me think about it. 1 week later, my husband and I, having talked it over again at the dinner table, I said, Dad and I have rethought this, and for you, I am going to run for Attorney General, and off I went. The other major case, which took a considerable amount of my time, was tobacco. I was in charge of all of the things related to their unfair and deceptive advertising to youth. So we went after that. We went after advertising of the product even to adults, because we thought they had clearly lied to adults, which ultimately the proof showed to be true. And then that settlement was subject to approval by Congress. And that was a long and painful process in Congress. And the bottom line is they failed to approve it. Unbeknownst to anybody, we went back to the table. I was in charge of that set of negotiations, spent almost 2 years where I was there weekly in New York. But after those 2 years, we did sign the agreement, which then and to this day is the largest financial settlement in the history of the world.
We've done all we could in this document, a comprehensive plan for the President and Congress and the American people to stop the addiction of these children, to stop marketing and advertising to our children, and to begin the process of giving these kids a chance to have a longer life.
People have really misunderstood what I'm proud of, which is the restrictions on advertising to youth. I was motivated every Monday morning as I got off that red eye in New York, where literally every cab had an advertisement on the top. Every major building had Joe Camel or the Marlboro Man. And there's none of that now. And it's a completely different landscape because they can no longer do that kind of advertising. But in the end, I think that was more powerful than the money that we received for the damage that was done to too many Americans. I loved my job as Attorney General. I don't think there's anybody who served as Attorney General who wouldn't tell you they'd loved the job. There came a point where I began to think, I really like to help set the policy rather than defend the policy. But I also began to think back to my days of John F. Kennedy and the ability to make a major impact. And I thought to myself, there's no greater place in the state of Washington to help them make an impact, particularly for our kids and families, than being governor of the great state. So I decided I would run. There were very few female governors. Hopefully now we've got some more that have just come in. I've helped train these new governors. They're doing a fantastic job dealing with this pandemic. So I hope more women in the spirit of the suffrage will step up and let not only their vote be counted, but serve and make some good decisions, be a part of making a good path forward, particularly for our kids and our families and our future. I never intended to push the boundaries. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. Again, I come back to my mom. Her point was, don't let anything get in your way. The three most important things you can do for yourself is get an education, and dream big and follow those dreams. And so when I thought about being a lawyer, I never thought I'm going to break ground. When I went to run for Attorney General, I took others to tell me, if you win, you'll be the first woman. I hadn't really even thought about that. So I didn't set out to do that, but I got to tell you how glad I am I did. When I became Attorney General, I would go into grade schools and I would teach kids about what we call bait and switch. So they became smart shoppers, if you will. And this young man came up to me after I was done and pulled on my jacket. And he said, "Hey lady, I want to be just like you when I grow up." That made my day. And I thought, he can't see the difference. As far as he's concerned, I've heard lots of daughters who have said to me, "You are a great role model." I can think of no greater gift that I can give if I can let somebody see a female in a leadership role, that they can do it too, and they need to do it too. So I didn't intend to do that, I must admit, but I'm sure glad that I listened to my mother and just let my heart lead my way.
I grew up in Southern California. I was actually born in Denver, Colorado in 1962. And my parents were son and daughter of very strong women. My dad was very much one to support his two daughters, my sister and I, and always treated us like we could do anything and always challenged us to try new things and be adventuresome and get out. My mom was a working mom. That's all I knew my whole childhood. She worked from the time I was, I think, in elementary school, and was a great role model on that front. She was a bookkeeper. Yeah, had a great childhood and value it every day. I attended Lakewood High School in Long Beach at a time where I think women were starting to feel very empowered in the workforce and certainly in education. The key to my success, I think, in high school and college was being able to play sports. And if there was a seminal event that occurred in my lifetime that changed the trajectory of my life, it would be Title IX. I would pin all of it to Title IX and the passage of that federal law because, one, it leveled the playing field in facilities for sports for women. And I played volleyball and basketball in high school. And that was significant because I remember when I started playing sports, we were relegated to these kind of substandard facilities. And by my senior year, we were having games, in the evening after school that were well attended, and it was a game changer. That confidence I gained from playing sports and learning to compete and learning and understanding that sports hierarchy of having a coach, having a team leader, all of those things have served me so well in the professional workforce, and I think gave me the keys to understanding how men operate in the workforce, which I think has really been something I've been able to work to my advantage. I went to school at Long Beach State in California and graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in communicative disorders because I wanted to be an audiologist. But what I did to put myself through school was working for the city of Lakewood in their recreation department. And I oversaw park facilities and staff and programming from sports to arts and crafts. And that's where I realized that my love was public service and my passion was public service. And so I switched my major over to public administration and ended up receiving my degree in public administration from Troy State University, which is out of Alabama. After I had graduated from college and was working for the city of Lakewood full time, I got married, and a longtime friend, we had known each other since we were 9, my husband John, and he enlisted in the Army, and we were stationed overseas. So that move took me to Ansbach, Germany, and he felt it was really important for me to finish my degree. So he supported that, and we ended up using the facilities of Air Force bases and their programs with contract schools like Troy State University to finish up my degree. So it really gave me the foundation for all of the other career opportunities I had in my life. I was 28 years old when I had Renee, and she's our oldest. At first I thought that was very old and very late in life to have your first child. Turns out it wasn't. It was really perfect timing because we had lived in Germany for about 2 years, and then John was stationed here at Fort Lewis. And so when I arrived in Washington, I was about 4.5, 5 months pregnant with my daughter. And when I interviewed, I ended up going back and telling my future employer that I was expecting. It was with the Thurston County Auditor's Office, and at the time, the auditor was Sam Reed, and he hired me and gave me the shot anyway, even though he suspected that I was going to leave 18 months later to move back to California. That 18-month job has turned into a almost 30-year career in Washington state government. So it worked out pretty well. One of the things that I really look back now on retrospectively, that having a mom who worked in the 70s, when most of my peers in school, their moms stayed home, their moms, had a snack waiting for them when they got home from school and had dinner on the table, and all of those mom things helped them with their homework. And I didn't. My mom worked, and I watched her do it. So I watched how she navigated all of those things. So I had this really calm place where I knew that work was going to be important to me, and I had a lot of ambition and a lot of goals, and that those goals could be part of the family. When I look back at my career, I was a better mom because I worked. The two women in my life that were the biggest influencers were my grandmothers. These were just kick butt women. I can look back now and they really were trailblazers. In the 1940s, they both independently left their husbands and moved to California. These women, first of all, got a divorce in a time where women didn't get divorces, and then had the courage to be single parents at a time, again, that women weren't single parents, and they moved to California for the jobs. My maternal grandmother, Madge, she was a Rosie the Riveter. She worked for McDonnell Douglas and during the war and then afterwards, and she built planes. And my paternal grandmother was Minnie Lou Yarbrough, and Minnie Lou, she worked at Macy's. She worked at the Hilton Hotel as a waitress, and they struggled. It's amazing to reflect back on it now as an adult, a parent of grown children, because I think back on the guts it took for both of them to do what they did. Both of them had rough childhoods. My mom lived in the projects in a place called Carmelitas in Long Beach, and it was that stigma of being poor that I think she carried with her whole life. About 2012, I was ready to kind of have another challenge and move on to the next phase. And Sam Reed had been Secretary of State and decided to retire. And so threw my hat in the ring to run statewide for Secretary of State, and was elected in 2012 and have served ever since. I've always believed that that's the key, is really get yourself to a position where you are really good at what you do, that you have all of those skill sets, and that your education and all of that experience come together. So when an opportunity presents itself, you're ready, because you can't foresee them. I could not have foreseen when I was 18 years old that I would be Secretary of State in the state of Washington. It was not on my radar in any way. I didn't know what the Secretary of State was. So I think it's those opportunities meeting your preparedness, and it's been a pretty fun ride. I just think that, and hope with the centennial of women's suffrage, that everyone, but women in particular, take time to reflect on what that means and how it's shaped our country and how it has led to wherever you are today. How you get to live your life is in direct result of that hard work that those really courageous women back in the late 1800s and early 20th century, their work laid the foundation for all of us to be able to exercise our constitutionally protected right to vote and participate and select our leaders. And, our country is better for it, and I'm just proud to be a small part of it.
As we go marching, marching, unnumbered women dead, go crying through our singing, their ancient cry for bread. Small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits new. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we go marching, marching, we bring the greater days. The rising of the woman means the rising of the race. No more the drudge and idler tend that toil where one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses.